Thanks everybody for coming. We have an illustrious panel today. Maybe everybody can just do a quick mic check so make sure we're good. Mag? Yeah.
Hey, I'm Dave. Nice to meet everyone. I work on Osmosis.
Hey, I'm Magnus. Nice to meet everybody as well. I work on Skip.
I'm Ollie. I'm with the Interchain Foundation. Thank you all for being here, and thanks to you guys.
And hey everyone, I'm David, and I'm with the dYdX Foundation.
Lovely. Thank you all for coming. So I'm just going to do a quick primer on sovereignty. I thought this would be helpful to get everybody on the same page. It's kind of a dense topic. And then open up to some Q&A here. So what is sovereignty? Sovereignty is a framework for understanding the architecture of control and direction in systems that regulate collective behavior. We call these regulatory systems institutions. And the particular institutions that we're interested in today are crypto protocols. The degree of sovereignty held by an institution constitutes its capacity to self-govern and act within its own limits. A blockchain is delimited by its consensus protocol, along with a shared commitment to a set of social practices. In order to evaluate sovereignty, we need to think about who's in control during steady state, but also who's in control under extenuating circumstances over long time spans and through various means of indirection. And in this sense, we must bring an expansive lens to an analysis of sovereignty, akin to a security mindset or cybersecurity mindset, but more meta than that. Because sovereignty operates at the apex of control, it encompasses aspects beyond what we might understand as protocol design. So a state asserting jurisdiction to impose overriding legal authority. Exogenous market forces, which might be the exchange rate of key assets or effects at a distance from exogenous derivatives. It might be prevailing norms, including user expectations or interoperability standards, or fundamental architectural constraints, including the limitations of a geographically distributed system or deployed cryptographic primitives. So it's important to distinguish sovereignty from independence, as sovereignty is necessarily achieved through recognition of others. A border is only real to the extent that insiders believe and outsiders recognize that belief. Moreover, sovereignty as a means towards collective determination isn't zero-sum. Establishing a trade route might result in giving up some sovereignty by creating economic dependence, while at the same time providing the resources to eliminate other dependencies and take greater action. And sovereignty is not a good in itself. We should keep in mind that sovereignty has a dual history, one of collective liberation and one of imperialism and disenfranchisement. Both originate with sovereignty. The specifics of who a sovereign institution recognizes as valid, which among them express control, and how they choose to act in the world all matter. So, needless to say, super complex topic, very fraught, but incredibly powerful, and absolutely essential to what all of us are doing here in crypto. So yeah, I didn't choose the panel topic. They just put me on this on this panel, so I'm sure they regret that decision. So I just wanted to start out with asking whoever wants to answer. What are the primary reasons that a protocol might want to become more sovereign? These could be either technological or social reasons, if anyone wants to step up.
I mean, a lot of protocols have specific goals they want, either from the community or just what they are. Like, I mean, the easiest one to think about stablecoins, or any decentralized stablecoins goal is make a store value that is, that stays relatively constant in buying power somehow. I think the two most prominent examples right now are Dai and Rai, but Rise goal is get monetary stability. You have certain types of collateral. You have a hard problem, so they want to make both mechanisms and social layer controls to ensure that you've dampened the volatility of whatever is collateral for being a stablecoin. But you also need social layer controls. Rise take was to be like the best stablecoin will have no governance. I think this has empirically been demonstrated. It has like severe limits. And we don't really have stablecoin projects that take in more forms of collateral that otherwise. But there's also many other reasons why you want sovereignty besides some community-oriented ones are if you want to be decentralized, or not. Decentralization isn't really the goal. Often the goal is you want to be globally inclusive, permissionless. If you want to be globally inclusive, you need to do things where you start like having a validator set that's geographically distributed. There's basically been no protocol design in this space to try to enforce this. If you want to be sort of unstoppable, like always available, World War III resistant, there's a lot of things you need at the networking layer or at, there's a lot of infrastructure things you need, and you need a social layer for when there's problems. There's no centralized dictator who gets to get control. You have social fallback. I don't know, maybe we could brainstorm some values that have this.
Yeah. So why would a protocol want to become sovereign? I think when I think about this, I think about it from two perspectives. One is from like you're building a protocol. Why do you want to be sovereign as a builder or as a developer? And the other is like as a community member, like why does it matter to join a sovereign community, right? So like why does it matter that you're joining something that is viewed as sovereign versus something that's viewed as not? Like what is the story there? From the developer perspective, I think it's much more clear. And when we talk about sovereignty, I think it makes more sense from the developer's perspective. It's like you want to be your own thing, right? One of the things that I always like to think about is like you have to be bullish on delusions of grandeur in crypto. Like people will always want to be a big thing. Your protocol, your chain, your smart contract, whatever it is, like it should be able to be a big thing and not be limited by another ecosystem, right? So that's why it's like you might want to build in like your own L1, and I think as long as the biggest things in crypto are L1s, Bitcoin and ETH, everyone will want to build one because that's exciting to build. From the user perspective, though, like why do you want to join a sovereign community? I think this is actually the more important thing to focus on, maybe just because we haven't really thought about it. But I think it's a lot of what you were saying, Deb, which is like, a truly sovereign community has a people, right? Has like a group that it is sovereign over, right? Like a nation is not just an organization. A nation is a group of people run like that are ruled by that organization and the people who recognize the rule of that organization. And I think the same thing is true in like a sovereign crypto ecosystem. It's like it has a people, a community who like govern it and like it and live in it and contribute to it and are talking in the Discord or whatever it is that your community actions are. And that's very empowering. Like it's very powerful to be part of a community, as we've seen. All the best tokens in the world with the highest prices have great communities behind them, or very strong communities.
I mean, I think another part of this is I think we want to start having internet native communities form that are around topics. Like I think Vita DAO and some of these DAOs are our first forms of this. We have a long way to go, but you should want to have a group of people across the world who care about a topic and be able to try to lobby government together or like get a city where they have these rights.
Yes.
Like less restrictive FDA or something.
Yeah, I think beyond the technology aspect and the social layers that both of you talked about, ultimately, like for me, the reason why communities and ecosystems want to become more sovereign is really around the product and user experience. I truly believe that the more sovereign an ecosystem, the more sovereign a product, the beneficiary of that is the ultimate end user. dYdX, to make this very kind of tangible, was obviously one of the largest dApps on Ethereum, and really is probably like the case study of a dApp that's moved to a Cosmos L1 and as an app chain. And a big driver of that was really around sovereignty and really customizing kind of the full tech stack to really be benefiting the end user, which is the trader. On Ethereum as an application, you're competing with every other dApp on Ethereum, whether that's for block space, for mindshare, you're outsourcing, a sequencer to an L2, and you're really not customizing kind of the chain for the intended use case. To me, sovereignty over kind of the full stack from the consensus layer to the app layer really allows for a dedicated app chain that benefits traders for perpetuals, really all parts of the stack. And so, beyond kind of the technology and the social aspects of that, I do think sovereignty ultimately is about empowerment, and it's empowering the core kind of contributors of an ecosystem and really giving them kind of the best tools to be able to get the job to be done successfully.
I'm wondering if you could actually say a little bit more about any learnings that you had in making that transition. So we're talking about becoming sovereign. It's a kind of transitional process. I'm sure you went in with certain objectives and preconceived notions, but yeah, kind of what did you learn about that process and surprises?
It's been quite a journey. Honestly, a lot of known unknowns and unknown unknowns. I think the biggest thing for me is definitely on the governance side. On Ethereum, we had a token that allowed users to participate in governance. Over the course of 2.5 years, we had 30 plus governance proposals with probably single-digit voter turnout. And in the scheme of DeFi protocols on Ethereum, that was probably on the higher end, but virtually every governance vote felt like just massive amounts of efforts to get people to show up and care. I think in Cosmos and with the proof-of-stake blockchain where validators inherit kind of voting rights that can be overridden by stakers, you just have a much stronger kind of alignment of interests. In under 8 months, we've had 150 plus governance votes with close to 60-70% voter turnout. And so just the level of community engagement and activation is just next level. And so, I think that's been kind of the most surprising thing to me is just how engaged operators of the network can contribute kind of permissionlessly. And that manifests itself in a lot of different ways, but that was probably the most pleasant surprise out of the experience. Beyond that, just as everyone in this room can imagine, supporting a migration of volume users' liquidity from one chain to the other is not easy. But I think in the spirit of sovereignty, I think a lot of our community has been just very excited about the prospect of the design landscape. And at this time, we probably have 500 or 1,000 plus independent community members that are all actively contributing in one way or another. And I think the energy is something that's really surprised me.
Ollie, I wonder if could kind of pick on you for a second. So the ICF is in a kind of interesting position where it's trying to kind of create this petri dish for the emergence of sovereignty without being kind of creating additional dependencies. And you are kind of charged with helping develop tools and develop the ecosystem. So that there's kind of a paradoxical relationship that you need to kind of hold opposites in your mind at once. I wonder how you approach that, or anything you've learned in the process of taking on that role.
Yeah, Sam, I think it's an important question, especially from the position of the ICF and from the developer experience position of it. Is you've got that balance of agency versus dependence, and being able to optimize the experience for developers in order to enable that agency side, I think becomes a really important part of this, where the dependence on any of the sort of core core components of this ecosystem, however you want to define those, can be overall reduced by enabling people to follow that agency. Actually, you used a term with me a little while back, wayfinding. And I love that term, wayfinding. I've used it many times since. And yeah, that I think fits that agency side pretty closely, where if we can have a dependable, predictable tech stack that's developed obviously open source, you've got developers able to find their own way in order to cater to that agency requirement, which even though there's a dependency on the ecosystem from a DevX side to create that, it creates a feedback loop that allows developers to build for themselves and build the way that they want to build.
Mag, we also build tools for sovereignty at Skip. I wonder if you want to elaborate on kind of how to find that balance. How do we think about what to build product-wise?
Yeah, so when you're dealing with a sovereign community or a community that sort of like values its, like self-ownership, I think the main thing that we saw, let's take Cosmos for example, right? I think Cosmos is a great example of a first attempt at sovereignty. And the way that they did that is like, okay, let's like strip out all these like other chains and dependencies, and like you can just build your own fully isolated L1, its own consensus, its own community, its own governance. Everything is like self-owned. One of the big discrepancies we saw is like, okay, let's say you want to do that, right? So let's say you're Osmosis, right? And you want to do this, you want to create your community, you've done this successfully, you've created your own state machine, your own consensus, you've gotten your own validators, and now you want to start launching an application. Well, it's like, okay, the first thing you need to do is you need to connect to other communities, right? Because like communities in and of themselves are usually like much more valuable when they're connected to other blockchains and other assets and things like that. Okay, now you have to like depend on a bridge, right? Like a separate thing that is now sort of like an external dependency. And then like let's say you want an oracle, right? Now you have to depend on a separate thing as well, like something like Chainlink or something like Pyth. And we didn't really, we wanted to offer an alternative to those things. We wanted to say, or we wanted to start to build more tools that let you sort of continue to just rely on your own community and your own operator set to provide these things. And I think like one of the really cool things in Cosmos is, we launched all this new technology in the past year, vote extensions, ABCI++, that enabled a lot more to come from the validator set that natively belongs to a chain. So when we think about building tools, we think about, okay, like how can we build things that let chains sort of like retake control of like their core dependencies that they need for their applications. So that's why both things sort of operate in that way that we build, both Skip Go and Skip Connect.
I think I'd add on that an unspoken value of every single on-chain community is reliability, and having the oracles ran by our validators is one of the biggest reliability boosts. Like everyone building on Ethereum is more than aware of just how unreliable it is to get an oracle update. So this is why this is how I frame why like Slinky is such a good value add to all of like Cosmos.
Skip Connect.
Skip Connect.
Dave, I want to ask you about some discussions that we've had previously where you've kind of introduced a number of protocol designs that I think take a very creative look at this interaction of dependence and interdependence in order to kind of achieve sovereignty. So mesh security is one of these, where you're kind of trying to achieve greater security through collectivity. And then we've also spoken about kind of some notion of like mesh censorship resistance, which I don't know if anybody here is super aware of, but has similar kind of property where you're trying to like use collective behavior in order to resist some or kind of retain some property. Relying on others to rely on yourself more actively. So I wonder if you can just chat a little bit about your thinking there, your approach to protocol design.
Yeah, I think something that's really cool is that a lot of ecosystems or a lot of L1s or a lot of on-chain communities have a lot of shared interests. Or like, I think nobody would say that I want my chain to be censorable. So if we have a bunch of us who say we don't want to be censored, then well, can we use the fact that we all have shared value to like, hey, look, if someone on Osmosis, if I think Osmosis is censoring, or I'm a user, I think Osmosis is censoring me, can I use the fact that, I don't know, maybe Ethereum or the Cosmos Hub isn't censoring me to like get censorship resistance? I think that's a really cool property we can get if we have these communities be able to interact. Or you don't even need like community interaction, you need the protocols to be designed with kind of awareness of one another, like a standard. So that's for censorship resistance. For sharing security, like one thing that's also cool is that I mean, this is inside of restaking as well, that you have a lot of collateral being used to stake things, but you can give extra slash conditions where you can just, if two chains are fine with their stake take on extra risk, they can secure each other for more dollars like slashable for security. Yeah, and does this give up sovereignty or not? I actually think not, and I think we've been too naive in proof of stake design since like day one. I kind of think that proof of stake design hasn't really iterated beyond Cosmos Hub's initial staking design. I don't know, hot take. I think the Ethereum lack of in-protocol delegations of regression on this, not this is a hot take for sure. But we should have protocols be able to be more opinionated about their validators and sort of divorce, like don't have capital be a one-to-one correspondence with who's your validator set. Because your validator set is ultimately going to be what's determining some lower bounds of censorship or inclusion or security rights. So we can, mesh security is an opportunity to also debundle this as well, of like, let's not just have your own token contribute staking security, let's have more, we care about the dollar value, and let's get properties that depend on validator set choice to have more protocol opinions. Like, if you want geographic distribution, we shouldn't just have it be based on capital allocation. Like, why is who's rich the same as being geographically distributed? Or who bet early on your protocol like 5 years ago?
Question for you, Dev. Like in the whole mesh security design, how do you view that in relationship to like lowering the cost of attaining sovereignty? Like, is there any like savings for individual chains in terms of like paying their operator set?
Yeah, I mean, so I think it's actually an insight I only really realized after seeing a lot of the restaking or Ethos blog posts, was that one of the big things high staking rates are paying for is the risk of this other token. Like, you get a lot of the early proof of stake arguments for independent chains were based off of actually illiquidity of the staking token means that it's so expensive to get 33% of stake because it's not even on the market. But there's a second problem there, which is that you have to pay every staker the risk of like capital risk of like holding in this volatile thing. So if you can get security from staking ETH or staking Bitcoin, or staking USDC, these are less volatile things. So now you can maybe afford lower staking rates.
Cool. I want to get into some of the nitty-gritty details before we end here. So a critical aspect of sovereignty is the credible threat to fork. And dYdX has forked before. Skip has suggested a means of social slashing or social monitoring. And Osmosis does regular upgrades and has thought about this a lot. Under what conditions should a chain fork? And how does one continue to demonstrate that you can fork if this power is not kind of regularly exercised?
Yeah, definitely into the spicy side here with so yeah, I think there's a lot of condition around forks, and we've seen a lot of like animosity towards them too. Like, but at the same time, forks are also useful from being able to choose a direction towards more sovereignty too. So I mean, in a weird way, you could also say that things like dYdX going from Ethereum to an app chain is actually a fork. And so I think there's sort of two sides to the argument there. Yeah, you could be doing it in a situation where there's a lot more negativity, where you're forking based on community dissent, but there is also the positive spin on it too.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a healthy level of community dissent is to be expected. I think if you look at our governance proposals, like we've had 150, I think, 99.9% of them have passed, and many of them unanimously, but then there's 5 or 6 that were a little bit more contentious, and the forums were very active. And I think that's really a symbol of like healthy disagreement, and it's really flagging, both sides of the argument. Ultimately, our community today still views kind of the governance system that exists as like really the best form of remediation, with kind of the hard fork being a nuclear option. I think having a fork is an important right, especially for minority contributors within an ecosystem. It can be used for emergency procedures if there's a security incident, or if there's a large enough kind of minority base that wants a different direction than kind of the majority. How do you remind people that option is available? I think it's really continuing to focus on transparency and getting people to look and revisit kind of the governance process more frequently. We spend a lot of time making sure that governance docs are clear. We continue to improve them at the foundation. As new issues come up or as we get feedback, we continue to communicate those openly. I think that's the best you can do. I think there's other kind of ecosystems where the loud, vocal minority of users often kind of threaten a hard fork, and I don't think that works, and it should really be reserved for attempts for greater sovereignty, or if there's really a security incident or just a general disagreement with the broader community.
So unfortunately, that's time, and we're running late, so we don't really have time for questions, but I'd like to thank our panelists. This was excellent. Thank you so much.